Let's have a look at some of the controls in Blender that we'll be using over the coming weeks. This is not going to be a comprehensive guide, this is just going to be an introduction. You'll find out more as you start working with Blender and become familiar with it. Here we've got a simple model of a fox on a base. Let's say that we want to increase the resolution of the base. This base, if we click on it, we can't see any details about it immediately in the status bar at the bottom. It says 264 verts, but that's referring to the whole scene. We've got to go into edit mode in order to change some of these details. So to go into edit mode, we either hit the tab key or we go up to the top here and go into edit mode. Edit mode is where we change the sub-object properties, the sub-object geometry and makeup of the object in question, the faces, the edges, the vertices, and so on. Rather than move my cursor all the way up there, I'm simply gonna hit the tab key. And now you can see, if we look back up here, we've gone into edit mode. We've gone into edit mode for the selected object or objects. We can select two objects or more and hit tab and take those into edit mode at the same time. When I hit tab again, we've gone back into object mode. It's one of those toggle controls. So now, when we have this object selected, the status bar shows the properties relating just to that object. And we can see now we've got 8 verts, 12 edges, 6 faces, 12 tries, and so on. So this is just the base. Let's change the base. I'm going to right click here, and right at the top of the vertex context menu, we'll talk about this maybe next week. Don't worry about it for right now. I've got vertices selected. In other words, the level that I'm working on is vertices, not edges and not faces. And we can see that up here. Doesn't matter, whichever one is active. Let's say faces are active, right click, we got subdivide right at the top. Doesn't make any difference in this case. So I'm going to click on subdivide. And nothing happens except that it's subdivided. And you can see this, I think, maybe not very clearly, on the model. It's got an edge loop all the way around the center of each direction. It'll be easier to see if we go to wireframe. So let's click there. Oh, and you can see as I've gone into edit mode that these tabs here have expanded to the point where I can't see all my presentation options. I can see wireframe, but I can't see solid or material. So I'm going to put my cursor over the icon bar and just scroll the mouse wheel. And you can see when I scroll the mouse wheel, then I'm actually bringing the rest of these icons into view. And there are all our presentation options in edit view. You'll notice there are less than in object view. All right, viewport shading, right, there we go. So now we can see we've got an edge loop around the center of each set of faces. I'm going to hit A to select everything, A for all. Hit A twice, again, to deselect. So it used to be that you would hit A once to select all, A again to deselect all. That's no longer the case. You've got to hit A twice. A. And now let's, once again, right-click, subdivide. And it's divided each of those former faces into 4. But let's now go down here. This appears when we're in the middle of using a tool, and when I maximize it by clicking on the little triangle to the left, now we see a whole bunch of things. Number of cuts 1. I can increase the number of cuts like this, up to a maximum of 10. I can also hold down the left mouse button and move my mouse to the left or to the right to change this number very rapidly. But no matter whether I slide the mouse or use the arrows, I can't seem to get beyond 10. However, if I double click and change the number by typing something in, now I've gone beyond that original 10 limit. So this is an example of a soft and a hard limit. The 10 is the soft limit. It's the limit of cuts you can make just by using the mouse. When I click in it and add, for example, make it 120, it doesn't do it. It goes back to 100. So 100 is the hard limit, the limit that you can type in. 10 is the soft limit, 100 is the hard limit. But I can still now go back to the hard limit and change it interactively, and now the soft limit has kicked in. I can only go back to 10. All right, let's undo that because we really don't want that many. Okay, let's return to object mode, the tab key, and let's have a look at some other controls. With this still selected, I'm going to move it. And let's move it with G. The outline turns white and I move it interactively. But you can see, if you look up in the top left-hand corner, that I'm moving the X, the Y, and the Z randomly. This is not how to move things, particularly in a perspective view. One way to restrict the movement is to hit G and then the axis, X. Now I'm only moving it along the X-axis. Or, as we saw before, I can hit G and then, if we're not using the widget, Shift-Z. Shift-Z locks out the Z component, so now I'm just moving in the X and the Y plane. So it's staying at the same height, it's just sliding around on the ground, as it were. Another way to do this is to hit N, bring in the side controls here, and now I can click and drag, or I can click and enter, or without this, I'll push this back, I can hit G, X to lock it to the X-axis, 2. And now it moves 2 units, whatever those might be, and we can set those. We'll find out how to set those next week. Move 2 units along the positive X-axis. Enter. Okay, and you can see we've moved 2 along the X-axis. I can also change this retrospectively. So I can say 2 minus 1. And now we've only moved 1 unit along the X-axis. So we can actually enter equations. If there's a value already in one of these boxes, we can use plus, minus, times, divide. So let's say 1 divided by 4. And that becomes 0.25. Or we can have 1 times, and we don't use X here, we're going to have to use a Python command, which is the asterisk, like that, 4, and then enter, and it's 4. So this is quite useful. You can enter simple equations in these boxes, simple Python-based equations. But you can't use X, as I say, for multiply. You have to use the asterisk. Right, what else have we got? If we're going to move it a fine distance, I'm going to hit GX again, and this time I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And look at what happens. I'm moving it much more slowly. It's only moving 1/10 as far for the movement of the mouse. This is with the Shift key. This is without the Shift key. And you'll notice something else. When I move the cursor off the top of the 3D window, when I'm moving something, it doesn't bang up against the edge and stop moving. It comes in again at the bottom, which is really useful. Not all 3D applications have this. And if I move to the side, I come in again on the other side. So this allows us to interactively move and rotate and scale things without bumping up against the limits of our window, or, in the case of small monitors, the limits of our screen. Very useful. Let's do the same thing, G, X, but holding down the Control key. And now, if you look in the top left corner, you can see we're moving by increments. We're moving by regular steps, and we can set these steps in preferences. Generally, they're 1 unit. If I want to rotate, so I'm going to hit R, Z, and hold down the Control. Now we're rotating by increments of 5 degrees. And again, this can be changed in preferences if we want. 5 degrees is pretty good. Also, if I now hold down Shift, you can see I'm slowly and very accurately rotating this object. And left click, which is the same as Enter, and there we are. Okay, supposing I wanted to undo that rotation. I've forgotten what rotation I made. We can go into the right-hand line using the N key again, and there's our rotation. I can just zero that out. Next, we can copy and paste values. So supposing I bring this fly in again, hover the cursor over this value box, Control C for copy. And I go up here, so that value box is highlighted. Control V, I've pasted that value. Again, quite useful. And you can see now it's rotated in 2 directions. Finally, because we're already at well over 12 minutes, let's rotate this not around the Y-axis, because I want to rotate it around its long axis, but that axis is now changed. RY isn't going to do us much good. But if I hit RYY, now I can rotate it around what's called the local axis. So be aware that there are world axes which don't change, and there are local axes for each object, which will change with the movement and the rotation of the object. Scaling obviously doesn't make any difference. And these are based on the center of the object, which is this little red dot, which we can see in edit mode. We can't see that in, well, we can if we do some careful operations, but mostly you don't see it in object mode. All right, we're almost up to 13.5 minutes, so that's enough for now.